Now, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
We turn now to the showdown on Capitol Hill over the $85 billion budget cut scheduled to take effect on March 1st. The White House and independent analysts fear the so-called sequester could jeopardize hundreds of thousands of jobs. On Tuesday, President Obama held a public event with a group of firefighters and police officers to pressure Republicans to negotiate an agreement to divert the cuts. Obama wants Republicans to end tax breaks, mostly for the wealthy, but it's uncertain Republicans will concede. Obama warned the cuts threaten to wreak major economic damage.
Smart, they are not fair, they will hurt our economy, they will add hundreds of thousands of Americans to the unemployment rolls. So now Republicans in Congress face a simple choice. Are they willing to compromise to protect vital investments in education and health care and national security and all the jobs that depend on them? Or would they rather put hundreds of thousands of jobs and our entire economy at risk just to protect a few special interest tax loopholes that benefit only the wealthiest Americans and biggest corporations? That's the choice.
On Tuesday, the economic group, macroeconomic advisors, predicted the sequester will slow economic growth by more than half a percentage point and result in the loss of 700,000 jobs. And a new article by Color Lines notes the damage will stretch far beyond jobs. The article is called "What Sequestration Mean in Real Life?" and it details how the spending cuts will force a dramatic pullback in critical areas like health, education, housing, and food security, especially in already vulnerable and marginalized communities. For more, we're joined by the author of the piece, Amara Jones. He is the economic justice contributor for colorlines.com. He served in the Clinton White House, where he worked on international trade policy. Amara Jones, welcome to Democracy Now! First, explain for people who don't understand this word, which is coming into the vocabulary with this meaning just recently. What does sequestration mean?
Yeah, it's even hard to say. Thank you for having me. Well, what it means is automatic across the board cuts made in government spending. And as the president pointed out, they're indiscriminate because they are across the board. And they are the result of compromises in Washington that couldn't have been made in terms of finding a way to do our budget in such a way to get us to a long-term management of our debt without indiscriminate cuts. And so that's what sequestration is, and that's what sequestration means. And because of the way that the budget is set up, most of those cuts fall on areas that are called discretionary spending because they're not set by a formula with set revenues and set expenditures like Social Security, Medicare, and others. And those areas are the ones that target the programs that focus on economic opportunity, that help the working poor, and that give average Americans a shot at making it in critical areas of, as you said, housing, food security, transportation, even unemployment insurance. And so for communities of color and communities that have been hard hit by the recession, it's a nuclear bomb that's waiting to go off.
And specifically, I think you mentioned as many as 185,000 people would lose Section 8 housing subsidy certificates. So what are some of the other immediate effects of if this goes into this happens starting March 1 or March 15th or in the next few weeks?
I mean, it reads like a laundry list, and we could take up the rest of the time going through the list, but some of the critical areas are 125,000 people will lose Section 8 housing, which is critical housing support for the working poor. 100,000 people who are homeless will not receive the support that they need without a place to go. There won't be 450,000 AIDS tests. Something like 500,000 vaccines won't be manufactured. 1 million people won't be able to access community health centers. Unemployment insurance for 4 million long-term unemployed will be cut by 10%. In terms of education, 70,000 kids won't have access to Head Start, another 30,000 in terms of child care assistance. And then if the sequestration goes on, because it's a rolling storm, if it goes on through the summer and into the fall, the programs that support up to 20 million of the nation's poorest students will be cut and are in jeopardy.
During an interview on Fox News on Sunday, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina suggested slashing health care to stop scheduled sequester cuts from, quote, destroying the military.
The commander-in-chief came up with the idea of sequestration destroying the military and putting a lot of good programs at risk. Here's my belief. Let's take Obamacare and put it on the table. You can make $86,000 a year in income and still get a government subsidy under Obamacare. Obamacare is destroying health care in this country. People are leaving the private sector because their companies can't afford to offer Obamacare. If you want to look at ways to find $1.2 trillion in savings over the next decade, let's look at Obamacare. Let's don't destroy the military and just cut blindly across the board.
That's Republican Senator Lindsey Graham on Fox. Your response?
Well, the premise is wrong, and this is one of the key problems with the approach in Washington. What the United States needs to do is figure out not how to cut, but how to spend. The only way that we are going to restore ourselves to economic health is by spending. The reality is that the United States government funds its level of activities at the same level of Mexico. The United States has the lowest level of taxation of any developed country in the world. And what that means is that we're underinvesting in infrastructure, we're underinvesting in education, we're underinvesting in the key things that fuel economic growth, and it's showing up in living wages, and it's showing up in terms of long-term unemployed and all of the problems that are knock-on from that. And so the conversation is wrong, and Lindsey Graham and his party just feed into that. And it's worth noting that one of the ways that we got into sequestration was through an agreement between the White House and the Congress, not once but twice. And so the entire frame of the discussion in Washington is wrong, and the longer it goes on, the worse the American people will be, because it's not what built this country. We funded investments. We believe in creating an economy that works for everyone, and until we spend at the level that's necessary, that can't happen.
And the likelihood of a deal before March 1, when?
Highly doubtful, because both sides weren't talking. They're all preparing for the list of cuts and positioning for the public relations disaster afterwards, and the problem is that this is one of 3 crises that's coming over the next 6 weeks for budget. So there's a possible government shutdown on March 27th, and then on May 1, the borrowing authority of the United States government runs out. That can shut down parts of the government, lead to a downgrade, and possibly default, depending on how it's managed. And so we're in for a rough ride here, and the longer it goes on, the more entrenched both sides will be, and the likelihood that everything will come off the rails.
Well, Amara Jones, I want to thank you very much for being with us. Amara Jones writes for Colorlines, economic justice contributor at colorlines.com. He served in the Clinton White House, where he worked on international trade policy. His piece that we'll link to at democracynow.org, What's Sequestration Mean in Real Life? This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. Thanks so much for watching this report from Democracy Now!, your daily independent global news hour. We don't accept advertising or corporate funding, but rather rely on donations from viewers like you. Please make your contribution by visiting democracynow.org. We need your support today to keep bringing you this hard-hitting, in-depth reporting.